It's been such an interesting road we have traveled. I was very fortunate. I had a company for 25 years, employee benefit consulting firm for 25 years, since 1988. And one thing led to another. Big consulting firms in the last 4 or 5 years were anxious to buy companies like mine, and unbeknownst to me. And then last summer, I went through that process and got convinced it was going to be a good idea. And honestly, even last summer, last summer was not that long ago. Was it last summer? This is 13, 12. Was it last summer that I did it? No. Summer a year ago, sorry. I've already been with them a year now. So Obamacare had already, that was already in the works, right? It's already been voted in. And I went through my process with these other 3 large companies that, wanted to buy us and merge with us. And I'm really amazed to think that through that 6-month process, this was well after Obamacare was, put in. Not one of those companies mentioned it. Not one at any of the negotiations or any of the processes did they mention it. Did I even think about it? And because I think at that point in time we were all thinking that Obama wasn't going to get reelected, or that was secondary to that the Supreme Court was going to strike it down. So it's been interesting. So that is significant because those 2 things delayed implementation or delayed knowledge. See, the readiness of PPACA or the government right now, the readiness of PPACA or the government to implement PPACA is way behind. And mostly because of the things that I just got through mentioning. So it wasn't until January, the law was there. Very few people had read it. This big, 17,000 page deal. Very few people had read it. Most Congress voted for it without reading it. You all knew that. Well, after the Supreme Court, after Obama got reelected, they could start telling us what it means and then giving us regulations to follow. And those are coming out about every week now. So, I thank God that I'm with a large organization with a bunch of ERISA attorneys that are disseminating all that information. So every Monday I get these updates to it. So it helps us to understand what we need to get our clients ready for, what the timelines are. And it's been very helpful. So the problem with PPACA now, though, is the confusion in the marketplace. And here I'm the consultant in this space, and I will have to say that we're probably, we're say 100% ready for what they've shared with us through regulations. But there's still about 50-60% to go. So they've already admitted that they weren't going to be ready for a big piece of it, which was the exchanges for companies under 50 lives. So those aren't going to be ready for January 1st. So they're moving those off to a year. And when I heard that, I started thinking, and this is speculation, that other parts of it might be getting delayed as well. Now, again, nothing official about that, or at least the penalty phase of PPACA there's talk up there that there's penalty phase might get delayed. So we'll see. So I thought what I would do today is just start off with some interesting discussion points. There was an article that came out in Time magazine a few weeks back, maybe a month ago, called The Bitter Pill. Did anybody, if you have to be in this business to kind of even read it, to want to read it, but did you read it through?
Most of it.
Did it generate some, emotion in you?
Yeah, I mean, it's sort of stuff you've heard before. I mean,
yeah.
Just around, like, in a news story or going to your doctor, but then to see it all in one place, kind of put together.
What's been insured? What's been shocking to you or noticeable to you when you get your bill from your healthcare provider, your professional, and then the insurance company pays your professional? What do you generally notice about that? Anybody? Yep.
The difference between what what is charged was what is paid.
Yeah.
But what's charged can be whatever the amount matches, doesn't
Yeah.
matter.
The charges appear to be arbitrary, somewhat arbitrary. Now, it varies with the product. I'm holding this, but based on that article, I'm gonna give you some examples. I bought this pad, this box of gauges, I'm saying that correctly, gauges today, at CVS Pharmacy. And I think I paid $3 for these. And in this article, it noted that this guy took about 4 different couples, and they were patients in particular hospitals, one in Houston and I think another one in Maryland and somewhere else. And successful hospitals, very successful hospitals. And he took the SIC codes from their bills. One was $48,000, and that was the testing that this person was going to go through, and then to decide what type of care they were going to be given. So it was $48,000. So that's that arbitrary number. They were uninsured. So his mother was going to stroke the check to pay for the $48,000. And the guy this author of this article took every single line item and drilled down and found out where did it cost, what was the cost, what was the generated cost, and who got the money, and that kind of thing. Well, there's so many examples, and I pulled it up and I thought I might maybe share some of them, but I want to go, does anybody have any guess what this cost me $3, I guess, today? If I bought 2 boxes, which I didn't want to do, it would have cost me $1.50, because you buy one, you get one free. So I just bought one. Well, no, buy one and you get the other one at 50% off. So anybody there was 4 of these boxes used on that guy's bill. So anybody want to hazard a guess?
Guess what?
Of what the hospitals, thank you, what was the hospital charging?
$50.
Maybe $200.
Close. $78. So there were 4 boxes times 78, and that's what the charge for just those. Gosh, he went over and over and over again some other examples.
From the article,
Yeah.
I mean, it was like I don't know, probably 5 or 10 examples that were just like that from across the country.
Yeah.
It's pretty amazing.
Yeah,
Like
it is.
some stuff you can buy at CVS.
But was this cherry picked?
No.
From what?
If you didn't say this was representative, then it was cherry picked.
That was the
Well,
impression.
here's another example I'll say.
That was the impression.
The
was
test
that it was
strips.
common.
The patient was charged $18 for each test strip. And they're called AccuCheck diabetic test strips. They're sold for $50. A box of 50 are sold for about $27 or 55 cents each, and the patient was charged $18 per. There was another thing that's interesting. The SIC code. Then you have these hidden codes, and I won't even read it to you, but here is something was billed for $8,000, $7,997.54. That's a stress test using radioactive dye that is tracked by an X-ray. You probably have done those. You probably know those. You probably order those. This won't be offensive to you, I'm sure. But X-ray computed tomography and a CT scan. Medicare pays $554 for that test. So this is a significant portion. This is not addressed in PPACA, what we're talking about right now. But this is starting to generate strong interest. There's a thing called the charge master in hospitals. The charge master I've known about, that is if you're going to receive money from Medicare in your hospital, that's a pricing list that supposedly cost of the 2,000 to 3,000 SIC codes that hospitals generate and bill Medicare for. And I'm sure they struggle every year to update it, to figure out what it is they're going to charge and what is their cost associated for these items. And then the insurance companies and the Medicare will reimburse about 10 to 15% in addition to that. So they'll give them 10 or 15% profit to that, okay, to their cost. They require it, the government requires it. So they have all this data from all these hospitals that receive money from the government because they're the largest purchaser of healthcare.
When you say cost, does that mean
Pure cost.
Cost of goods sold, or does that include labor, et cetera, et cetera.
It includes labor. And it's all submitted by the hospitals. It's their data to the government, and then the government says, okay, we're going to pay that plus 15%, or that plus 20%. And then there's a retail cost for that that's over here, that in theory few people pay. But and then the healthcare community, United Healthcare, Aetna's, and everybody, they come in to negotiate with Baylor, for example, and then they will brag that they have a 50% discount off of this number over here. But in general, they're paying about 30% more than, say, Medicare. So this lack of transparency is, I think, a good point, is starting to be addressed, and it's just starting to be addressed. And I thought that might be helpful for you all to know that now. I think it's part of, it's not part of the bill, but it's because of this bill. And I think another interesting thing that I read this morning was, is Sibelius, I think is her name. So she is the head of health and human resources right now. Okay. And apparently, I didn't know this, but she is out asking for donations to help fund PPACA or help fund Obamacare, because Congress is, stymied and they're holding money back for it. So she's asking for donations. So where do you think she's going for those donations?
Insurance company.
Yeah. And the article is pointing out that the committees has sent letters to a dozen healthcare companies asking, meanwhile the Republicans, let's see. But the problem is that Health and Human Resources, they're making judgment calls on what these insurance companies are going to be getting. And so they feel like there's a conflict of interest for her to be asking them to give money. And so I think that's kind of interesting. That's been happening.
Mark, the other aspect of that study, if I remember correctly, there was he also takes different hospitals and kind of treating a heart attack was treated for about $3,500 in a city in Arkansas with similar treatment in Pennsylvania, that's $95,000 or something.
Right.
And then he said, okay, maybe that's a state-to-state separation,
Yes.
but if we just took New Jersey, and I think he checks out how a pacemaker installed in New Jersey in two different hospitals,
Yes.
70,000 versus 110,000. And
Right.
so these kind of disparities.
We don't have, there's nowhere, if you're shopping for a Mercedes, none of us here would, but I know Mahesh would be shopping. So when Mahesh goes to shop for a Mercedes, he can check all over the country within 15 minutes about that price, so he's ready. What else do we buy that we're not really ready to shop for? So I believe that this is all part of the consumer awareness part of this is, I think, going to be more helpful than PPACA. Here's another thing. Sorry that I can't document this. I can't document it just because I didn't write down the documentation, not because I'm hiding it from you. But it was a little sad. Now, there's all kinds of other people who are saying, we've done this study and PPACA is going to cost $1 billion and $1 trillion more and who knows what. But here's what was, I understood why they came out with this one. All right, there are about 45 million Americans that don't have health insurance. There's about 25 million that just say, 20 million, that have the opportunity to get it but choose not to. I know in my own business, well, we've had it for 25 years. For 25 years, if an employer says you need to pay $10, $20, $30, and you have the opportunity to decline it, I know with the lower paid people, generally speaking, if you're going to charge them something, at some point they just say no, and they'll go uninsured. And that's been part of my practice for years and years. So there are people that have opportunity to get it, but they choose not to pay for it. There's been a study done that the majority of this particular group that I'm familiar with is about 20,000 employees, and let's say about 14,000 of them are hourly. The majority of those 14,000 right now believe that in January, healthcare is going to be free. And that is not true. So I think that's an interesting thing, that why this particular group came out and said this. we really think there's about 22 million Americans that are uninsured, and that's the really lower paid people, or people who do not have jobs. Okay, people that would like it but can't get it. About 22, 23 million. This study says that after BPACA, after it's fully implemented, there's still going to be about 22 million people that are uninsured, and we're all in this room. If you own a piece of property, let's say, you're contributing to the health care for those 22 million right now, for Parkland Hospital if you live here in Dallas. So I think right now it's about half of my tax bill for my home-ish, somewhere in that neighborhood. So that'll be disappointing. If that ends up being true, and we spend all this money, and that realization comes because there's a lot of people that are going to go. I'm going to tell you a few of the things maybe you already know, but there's a lot of people who are making $20,000 a year and are going to say, I don't want your insurance because you're going to charge me too much, and the exchanges is not free. It's not free. Well, I'm not paying. It's free to me right now. I just go to Parkland. So they're going to say no. And currently, they're only going to be charged $95. That's their penalty right now. I think they call it a fee or a tax or something. So they'll pay the $95, just annual, or 1% of their total household income. So if they're making $20,000, and whichever is larger. So if they're making $20,000 or something like that, but their spouse is making $30,000, it's 1% of that number, whichever is larger. 1% of the total household income. And that scales really quickly. By 2016, it's $700 for them. But that will probably still be a lot less than purchasing healthcare. That's why I think that we're still going to have a whole lot of people on the sidelines that are not going to be part of the healthcare. And the other thing that I think is interesting is that the health insurance community is very excited. I believe the health insurance carriers are very excited, and although they're having to pay a whole lot of fees here. One of the fees is, sorry I'm getting off of this, but this is interesting, but I think it's kind of dry for a general discussion, a big general discussion that we're having here about the fees. And I'll hit things that I think you'll find interesting. But I was going to say, one of the things they're going to add to insurance companies next year. They're telling the insurance companies, there's only about 4 of them. So that's not there used to be 15 to 20. Now there's 4. And they're going to, depending on how much portion of business they have in their country, they're going to be allocated a bill of $8 billion. So that's next year. And that scales up really quickly. Now, none of those carriers are going to pay that and have it hit their P&L without something else coming back in the door. So we're all going to be paying that, no matter how we're insured. We're all going to be paying that, yeah.
Now, I would like to actually comment something that, when this Obama healthcare came, they created a number of federally qualified clinics nationwide. There were 10,000 clinics are there. I was in Washington, D.C. for the national conference. And for example, they have actually a couple of clinics here in Dallas, Fort Worth. One is there in Fort Worth, and I own a staffing company, so I recruit doctors for this clinic. So I was with the CEO of that clinic. I said, "How many patients you saw last year?" He said, "We treated 30,000 patients." And where these patients? He said, majority of these patients, he says, they came from Mexico. Right. They are seeing the doctors for the first time because he was saying that the doctor wanted to speak Spanish. So what they have not taken into account is tens of thousands of people who come here and take the free treatment, and they don't have the infrastructure or this, which is not really accounted into that, because this federally qualified clinic I've seen last year alone 15 million patients. Out of that, I would say 90% is not really accounted in any of these government figures. So it's going to be really, really, when it comes to it, it's going to be a real mess.
Yeah, it's going to be expensive. Yeah, a lot of companies here employ a lot of Mexican Americans, and I'll tell you something very interesting. I'm married to a Mexican. It's hard to explain, but I do understand it culturally. I have magnanimous employers, have had for years, that have paid 100% of the, the lower wage Mexican guys that do their, heavy lifting in the warehouse or whatever. And some of them, 50 to 60 of them. I'm thinking of one company over there off of Denton Drive. They all have health insurance, they all have a drug card, and they have an ID card. And I would hire fluent Spanish-speaking people to give them the enrollment information of what they need to do when they want to go to the doctor and such. And then we did an analysis on their claims and to see how many of them even went. And I think it was less than 5% that had any claims whatsoever, their card was registered at all. They just go to their little neighborhood little clinic, and they go to Parkland Hospital. Even if they have, and they're at Parkland Hospital, and they won't pull out their card because they were in that time frame, which is not but a few years ago, they were afraid of being identified. So I guess thinking they're illegal. So they never even pulled out the insurance card, even though this guy's paying $300 a month for it. So anyway, there's a lot of interesting pieces. I love these little clinics now. By the way, CVS Pharmacy, and I don't know if Papaca made that happen. I don't know. But the CVS Pharmacy, anybody go there to get something done? My wife,
Flu shots.
yeah, my wife has gone, taking my son there to get a malaria shot. He needs that for going to college, I guess, and done other little things over there. And it's so convenient. And there's and I've seen it in practice. There's, I don't know what you call it, traveling kind of nurses and doctors. I forget the name. They'll be upset with me. They make. We've talked about it
White
before.
glove?
Huh?
White glove.
White glove. And white glove, I've seen it where a guy came out of a board meeting we were having. You came out, sat there for about 15 minutes with the gal, and she was answering questions, and then ended up giving him a Z-Pack. So he didn't have to spend, the hour or 2 hours to go to the doctor to get the Z-Pack. These people came right to him. So there's, I think, there's a lot of things that are going to get solved here, but I think the biggest problem from a cost perspective in that article, you remember that I thought it really pointed out something very interesting, that the lobbyist, you have to register your lobbyist, you have to tell the government how much you're spending for your lobbying. And in the healthcare, which is the Association of Hospitals, and all the other people interested in healthcare, the people that make these CAT scan machines that want to sell into healthcare, they spent together about 3 times more in lobbying the government in the last 10 years than even the military lobby, which was not, a distant second. And they were naming some others. And so what they did very good at, they were able to keep the at the forefront. They were able to keep that it's who pays. It's not how much you pay. Okay, did I say that correctly? So they want us to think we want to find somebody who will pay. Taxpayers and everything. It's not what we pay. It's not that we charge $70 for this. I don't mind them doing it, but I just think it's nice. It's important for us to know it. I think if they can get it, fine. But I think it's important for us to know things that are happening. Here's something I think was interesting too, and it's all about marketing. The private hospitals, the nonprofits, they were mentioning that all this revenue, they make about 12 to 15% off of the gross, which is a pretty high net number, paying no tax. So they were giving an example, some hospital in Connecticut, and I forget the totals, but they made about, let's say, $500 million in gross revenue, so 50, 60 million in net. Then that was just a year. And so they have to do something with that money. They're a nonprofit. Can't just, distribute it to the CEOs and CFOs and all the employees. So what they did was, and all of them have the same problem, they build stuff. They build bigger. You may be, watching that happening down here. But they have to build buildings, they have to build beds, they buy stuff. So they can't, otherwise they can't just remain to be nonprofits, right? So I think that's it's such a great article. You guys ought to read it. It's very interesting, and I think it's made some. But here's interesting. There were 3,000 in 1997. There were fewer than 3,000 CAT scan machines, and they average a year 3,800 scans at that time. In 2006, there were more than 10,000 in use. So I'm getting marketed to by Cooper right now. They've got a deep, dark MRI thing that I can go put my whole body through, and they can find anything in my body and just pay $1,000 for or whatever. I just joined Cooper, so they're actually calling me. We're going to give you a discount. Can you please come and use our machine? And but now in 2006, there's 10,000 in use, but there's an average of now 6,100 a year being used. So heck, I think I'm belaboring the point, but I think all of that stuff is important, and I think it's important that we become, that all of these fees become more and more transparent, and then we can choose to go to Baylor and pay $1,000, or go to, well, it used to be Brookhaven. I don't even think Brookhaven exists anymore, but another hospital or an MRI machine down the street that's, charging $200, because there's no cost to these things.
But yes,
So
this is paid by the insurance companies. When you go, in regards to where you go.
generally
the
speaking,
insurance
it's paid by the insurance companies.
But yes, but they're going to have a cost. They're going to have a price that they will pay. If they're not going to pay, they really don't care what the bill is, because it's going to say
Right, the 50% of whatever the number
MRI
is.
machine for this condition.
Yeah.
This is what we pay. So
But the other part of that is doctors feel like they need to. Doc, you probably had to get a lot of tests, because many times you do it to protect yourself. You get tests to protect yourself from being sued later. So you have to, there's just so much interesting pieces to that. But all right, I'll go over some of these slides real quickly. Isn't it amazing that part of the new law is that they're charging 0.9% for all the millionaires that make $200,000 and above. So that amount of money, that the 0.9% generated, is it on this slide here? Almost $90 billion. I'm stunned by that. I wonder if that math is correct. It just can't be. It's a lot of dough. But that's in place now. So the next slide. Okay, the individual mandate, does there anybody not know that that's what's happening? So everybody needs to buy health insurance somehow or another, through your employer or through the exchanges that in theory are going to be up. Now some states have them already up and been using them. Massachusetts has been doing something like this for a long time, and I watched a program on that the other day. So fascinating what's happening there, but what was some of the most interesting facts about that? Maybe it'll come to me later, but so everybody's going to have the opportunity. We're meeting with our clients right now, and it's scary to everybody, because we're still not sure, how many of our people who are not taking our insurance are now going to be on our insurance to jack up our costs. Restaurants in particular are, starting to semi-panic about it. I was talking to the guy in charge of it. I won't say the name of the company, I guess, but one of the most well-known restaurant organizations in the nation. The head of the PPACA legislation within the organization, and then the government relations guy is a good friend of mine, and he told me that of about 8,000 of their hourlies, he thinks about 1,200 of them will get on their plan. So that's a big move for them, but there's still going to be 8,000 or 6,000 or 5,800 that are not taking insurance, and they're only going to try to charge them about $95. But they know, and I know too, the waiters and waitresses are not going to pay it. And they'll go to the exchange. Well, the exchange is going to be more than $95, I can tell you that. So they're going to say no, they're going to say no, and then they're just going to have to pay the penalty, the $95 for year one. But they think they have about 2 years of that. And then beyond that, they don't know really what's going to happen, and I guess really we don't either. One thing to know is this is still a moving target, and then if it gets really bad for the Democrats, according to my buddy over there, he's saying that behind the scenes, all the Democrats are afraid of elections for 2014, so they're starting to go to the Republicans to say, let's work something out. And one of the things was he was the one that told me that it's possible that it'll be enacted. It'll be there 2014, but the government's going to say we're not going to, enact any of these excise things and these other fees that are involved.
If there's going to be a mandate, will the premiums also be controlled?
No.
So that the insurance companies can charge anything they want?
Yeah. Supposedly there's competition though.
Among the four?
Yeah.
Which of these, what are the names?
Aetna United, Blue Cross and Blue Shield, and Aetna United and Cigna.
Is there gonna be across the state selling? Across the state selling?
Yeah. There'll be competition in there, but it's just going to be hard. It's just going to be hard. I think that's going to be the cheapest right out of the gate. Because they're going to be fighting for share. So we'll see. We'd have no pricing currently. So it's going to be fun.
What about the exchanges? How will be pricing the exchanges?
We're still waiting to see. Still waiting to see. So there's a thing called minimum essential coverage. The IRS, the government is telling your company, if you own a company, if you have over 50 employees, by the way, 50 full-time employees, and there's some math that you can do, very simple actually. It's the number of hours worked per month for your part-time population divided by, I believe it's 120 on a monthly basis will give you full-time equivalents. So if you've got, I've got a guy that's got 4 salaried, and he's got 100 hourly, and he thinks what he's going to do is get those hourly guys down below 30 hours a week, because you have to be, if you make 30 hours a week, you've got to provide them health insurance. They're considering, if you have 50 of those people, full-time employees, then you've got to obey all of this. If you have less than 50, you don't currently. Okay, so I don't know if this is too much detail, but if I've got 100 employees and I've got 4 salaried right now, he's only covering 4, and the rest of he makes pallets, so wooden pallets, and one of the largest, and he's right down near downtown. Doesn't provide health insurance, so all Mexican population, and and I told him not to do that because I think that's just a temporary fix, even though I brought the paper here and somebody else is going to do that also. But I told him just not to offer health insurance and let everybody go off to the exchanges if he wants. So we're still analyzing that. But so minimum essential coverage that you have to offer your employees. It's a value of 60%, and it's not just that's a formula for your premium that you're charging plus the plan that is being offered. So 60% is the number they call it the bronze plan, and that's the low cost plan that must be available to all employees, and you as the employer are not allowed or shouldn't charge or can't charge more than 9.5% of their income. Now, it's written as their household income. Of course, you don't know what that is, so we're telling our guys to just stay below 9.5% of that individual employee's income. But the way we think about it is, if a guy's making $20,000, that's $2,000 for the year. So that's about $180 a month, isn't it?
Mm-hmm.
So $180 a month, and I know by experience they're not going to take it. If you say, here I'm offering you this, I'm going to charge you $180, they're not going to take it. This is why, and then they'll go off to the exchange, say no to the exchange, and then they'll pay the $95 is the way it currently looks like it's going to happen.
That's $95
Premium
a year.
assistance, by the way, is available. It's there's going to be some, if you make 400% below the poverty level, I think I read recently that even like $80,000 a year for a family of 4 is below the poverty level of 400%. So it's kind of interesting. The math on that is really kind of interesting. So, but if you make 400% less, then you're eligible in January for premium assistance
That's 400% less.
than the poverty level. And that's
How does that work, 400%?
well, you just multiply whatever that poverty level is for your zip code, for your income, and then if you
Okay.
stay below 400% of that. But the important thing to know about that, the government will give you some premium assistance. We don't know what that is yet, so we don't know what the net is going to be. But what's interesting is you're not eligible for that if you have an employer who has offered you this and wants to charge you $180 a month, and you say, no, I can't afford it, and you say no to that, and you go down in here to the exchange, you're not eligible to get government assistance. You become ineligible because you've been offered it here, even though you can't afford it, and you could afford it here. We still don't know what the premium assistance is going to be, but you're not eligible because you said no here. So that's a
Which premium
kind of a
assistance?
gotcha there, that you're not eligible for government assistance if you work for an employer that is offering you the insurance. Okay.
So what responsibilities does an employer have to track that cycle of somebody turning down insurance coverage that's offered?
What I understand right now, all I have to do as the employer is this.
So we don't care at that point
Right.
if they, okay.
Right. You've done your job, so to speak. But this is going to be available for those who don't have this. Yeah.
What's the minimum essential coverage cover, and what's the?
I think that's a little too deep. It's going to be very basic insurance. It's going to cover 60% of your expenses.
So back on that penalty.
Yeah.
You said $95.
Yeah.
That's the first year,
First
correct?
year.
But don't those penalties go up?
Yeah.
You know,
I
pretty
think
quickly.
I saw 2016, which is just 2 years ago, is $700.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I thought I saw that as well.
Well, here, maybe
So-
it is right here. Year 1, year 2, year 3.
Okay.
Okay, percent of income goes to 2.5% of your household income. But again, that's not your problem either, as an employer.
So Mark, I have a question.
Yes.
Is it possible that sometime down the road, employers will stop offering insurance and like a cafeteria
Yeah.
plan, give you some dollar
Yes.
amount and say, go figure it out yourself?
Yeah. There are smart people that believe that this is just the beginning of maybe 5, 6, 7 years where we'll just have a big old single payer like, essentially every other modern country in the world. So this is just the beginning towards that. And I was reading an article this morning, as a matter of fact, or what was this, about what a doctor's life is going to be like 5 years from now. And they were, there's 35,000 doctors, 30,000 doctors leaving the medical profession a year. And there's 20,000 going in. I think it was 35 and 25. So we're having a net loss right now of doctors. Some other features about that I think we're but they're going to be employed, basically. They're going to be employed of an institution rather than having their own
They're
practices.
expecting over 100,000 shortage now. As of today, they need like 50,000 doctors, right now. American doctors.
So Mark, we have a guest here from Blue Cross and Blue Shield.
Oh, I noticed him. Hi, Ron.
Morning, Mark. How are you?
Good. By the way, I've recorded this for your benefit so you can bring it to Blue Cross and use it as a training program for your
Perfect. I like it.
Do you want
As
to
you know,
correct
we work with
anything?
you.
Do you want to correct or add to anything that I've been saying?
Other than the fact that I don't think I'll correct anything. Adding, I mean, it's obvious that the complexities of the law going forward are almost overwhelming. And it's the gentleman here, I think, is very astute when he asks the question,
Yeah.
about the move to defined contribution.
Yeah.
I have long held the belief that the move to defined contribution is the ultimate end game for the employer.
Yeah.
That clearly came to me in reading a Fortune interview with Randall Stevenson, AT&T CEO, where shortly after the ACA was passed, they were focusing on the $2,000 per employee per year penalty should an employer with more than 50 refuse to or decline to offer insurance. And he said, well, I've got 300,000 employees. That would be $600 million a year. So your first thought as you read that is, well, they're going to offer insurance. Then he went on to say, but my insurance coverage cost me $4.7 billion a year. Do the math.
Yeah. Well, you know, that's right. 'Cause what you're saying is that is, and you know, we're a unique country where your employer is tied to your health care. I mean, our employer is not tied to our insurance of our home and our car, but you know, that's old news. So I think we are moving in the direction where we're not going to have, and I wouldn't mind that as an employee. And I think might be healthy for America if we ever get to that point. But the exchanges, now let me ask you this, I was talking about the exchanges kind of generally. Is Blue Cross is going to be ready for an exchange? And in fact, all the carriers are going to be ready to have an exchange January 1st. Now, the ones that are right now that everybody's saying that we're worried about being ready, those are the individualized per state, like Texas, for example. Can you talk a little bit about that? About like what's in theory in danger of not being ready?
Well, I don't know if I can get down to that granular detail. We do know that the current administration in Texas has never looked fondly on exchanges. In fact, we couldn't. It was recommended that you don't even utter the word exchange, if you will. But you know, obviously now the feds are scheduled to come in and to run the exchanges. I think one of the big concerns that insurance...
Federal exchanges are the ones that are going to be going to work. We're
And
all
are they
going to be
gonna be
shocked
ready?
if they're going to be ready.
Exactly.
Okay.
So that puts us all in a quandary. What happens when registration starts in 2014, in October of this fall for the
But
2014?
Blues, Aetna, United, in theory,
Right.
are going to have an exchange ready and up and running that we can direct employers to go to. And then each individual employee within that employer group can go and pick whatever plan is on that exchange, and the employer can just say, hey, I'm paying $300 a month to you, and you can use it for whatever you want on the exchange. So that should be ready by 1/1. And there's such things as private exchanges, stuff like that. I don't think I've kind of hit on all of this. So you know what, the AT&T guy, though, if I'm a big employer, I don't have to pay this $2,000. I can just say, I've got coverage. It's not affordable to the population that I know we're all talking about. You know, the ones that make $20,000, $30,000 on down, they're not going to pay $100 a month.
So the definition of affordable is 9.5%.
9.5% of that person's annual salary. So
Of that person's household.
household income, but nobody's, the safe harbor for the employer is to judge it based on the employee's income currently, but you're right, the legislation says household income, because so that's even bigger. They can't afford it off the 10% off of the 20,000. So I think there's still going to be a lot of people going, I'm not interested. And who knows what the future of that is. So full-time employees, we talked about that. A lot of people, even in the article today, and these, you know, a lot of part-time people are going to be upset by that because they want the income, they don't want the insurance, but they want to be able to work. So, like Long Beach is saying, we're going to cut you down to 27 hours. Just not a solution. And probably the largest restaurant group that I'm referring to, that's not even on the table of discussion. Most companies are just not considering it. Although I heard some people say, hey, McDonald's and other companies say, I'm out of the healthcare business, you know, see ya, you guys can go, we'll pay the penalty. Then there could be many more big companies that do that. And a lot of companies would go, hey, $2,000 an employee, it's cheap. Cheap, it is cheap. I'm not too worried about this. A lot of people are about, there's another fee coming. It's called the Cadillac tax. Ron, I mean, other people seem to be alarmed by this. I am not at all, because I think we can make adjustments to it. So I'm not worried about this tax. If anybody pays that tax, I would be surprised. Okay. That's if you have too good of a plan by by their determination, by 2018, too far away, considering what this legislation is, then nobody's going to pay that tax, and I'd be willing to bet a lot of money on that. Thinking ahead, tools available. So this is just some of our stuff to tell the employers that we make this presentation to. So in a nutshell, it's moving every week. It's very hard for big organizations. We're meeting with our clients right now that are 1/1 renewals, that are spending $1 million, $2 million, $3 million, $4 million for their health care. And they're asking us to tell us we need to do our budgets. And it's not that easy. Without this legislation, we could tell them plus or minus 2 or 3%. With the legislation and the knowledge, the lack of knowledge of how many of their employer population is going to want to get on the plan, jump on the plan, not be on the plan, it's just kind of a moving target. That's the difficulty for the American workforce, not the workforce, but the companies today. But moving weekly, and I don't know, Ron, when I don't know, you were here, do you think that there's a possibility of a delay of enforcement? Is that talked about at the circles at Blues? Because of political?
It's always a possibility. However, there's such a strong push for credibility from the administration to make sure that this thing is ready to go and up and running. And sure, we can take a hit on a few glitches, but by and large, the program should go forward. But Mark, I'd make one other comment with respect to this defined contribution. Some of us around the room remember 30 years ago when IBM made the conversion from defined benefit to defined contribution and pensions. The health benefits will be something else. The light's been turned down. Light bulb's been turned on with respect to ACA, and now employers will be able to offer it, but convert it into defined contribution and budget for it. Let the employee then suffer the burden of exchange activity itself.
Exactly. There's fees that I didn't even mention, but the $63 per belly button fee, per person fee, that's not per belly button, is it? Per belly button. So companies have to pay $63 per belly button next year in their firms, and then they're going to pay $1 now, or $2 this year, $1 this year, $2 next year. There's other fees that are built into this that are not insignificant. So you were going to mention?
Yeah, actually, another dynamics is as a part of this accountable care now they are actually focusing the shift on the physicians, like Medicare. Management of the Medicare, actually they started giving licenses called accountable care organization. It's owned by the physicians, So the money they save to the Medicare, the doctors are getting the incentives. They're given over 100,000 licenses for the doctors to actually control the Medicare patients, Like every patient has say $10,000 a year, and if you actually, the money you save, and that money goes to the physician groups instead of the insurance companies.
So he's being paid commission for
Reducing,
not treating or
saving money.
Yeah, saving money.
Not sending sending the patient to the ER and so right now there's no incentive. So they're given hundreds of licenses across the country.
Last little comment is, I haven't mentioned the one thing. The biggest driver of our healthcare dollar is maybe not anything that I've said here today. It is that in America, unique to our country, is our poor nutrition habits, let's say it that way, and alcohol and drug addiction. So, would you agree, Ron?
Yes.
That 50% of our healthcare spend is because we're awful at what we eat, and we eat drugs and alcohol, unlike the fine nutritional country that.
I won't hold myself as an example, but I want to please join me in giving a round of applause to Mark for the obviously, this is a very complex topic, and what we were trying to do today was to kind of highlight kind of some of what we know and most of what we don't know. And really, there is a lot that we don't know. And the idea would be to kind of highlight things that we need to be concerned about, both as employers and as as employees, in a manner speaking, about things that we need to be sensitive to as this legislation rolls out this next few years. I thank you for your patience being here today. We're going to be around here to answer any questions. Mark is going to be around answering any questions. I'm going to seek your indulgence for a minute while Brad talks about his latest project for multifamily. So this is a brief advertisement moment. So please.
It's absolutely blatant advertising. Thank you all for being here this morning. Medical is certainly my favorite topic of the day, because our newest apartment community at Encore Multifamily is under construction on Maple Avenue, just around the corner from the new Parkland Hospital and also from UT Southwestern's teaching hospital. Found out recently that this is the largest medical project under construction, not just in Texas, not just in the U.S., but in the entire world. $2.5 billion, 15,000 new employees coming to the area over the course of the next 18 months. So the demographics are pretty compelling. I had the opportunity yesterday to tour our competitors, our next door neighbor who's completed their lease up about 6 months ago, and the competitor across the street who's in the middle of their lease up, to gain some ideas. Property management people are so wonderful. I mean, they're so honest. They'll tell you exactly where the developer screwed up, what they would have done if it were their money, and how I should do next door, okay? So it's wonderful to get that input, and it validates some of the fit and finish and the amenity package that we're supplying in our project, and gave us some new ideas as well. One of the more interesting things, and the things that I'm really glad to report, is that their rents are much higher than our pro forma rents. So they've been able to establish a very high watermark in rents that should make our investment very profitable. Next door just sold to a large apartment REIT, Emily, out of Chicago, for a sales price of $155,000 per apartment unit, $185 per square foot. We have a flyer for you to take with you. Our all-in cost is $111,000 per unit. So I think the chances of our success financially are very good. We've been into our equity raise. Daisy Chen is with us this morning. She's in our equities group. We've been in our equity raise now for about 3 months. And out of the $9.5 million that is required from the limited partners, because we put in 10%, which is a little over $1 million, we've raised about 7.5. So we're at the tail end of a raise, $2 million. Surya, thank you for your investment. We appreciate your confidence in Maple. We think you're going to be a happy investor, and be happy to answer any questions you might have about that.
This is, since we are creating jobs, so it's going to come under EB5 or no?
This will not be EB5. No, what the jobs I'm talking about are all hospital-related jobs, 15,000.
But
In the
still
apartment,
actually that so many jobs are created.
yes.
This is too late to be an EB5.
It won't be.
Yeah. So this is conventionally financed.
What they'll be doing to the existing apartment building, that still stays?
You know, I don't know what's happening to the existing apartment building, frankly. I apologize. I just don't know that. You know, we're so excited about the new building, we're not sure what the old building's going to be. I don't think it's going to be abandoned. I mean, the old Parkland, as you know, was renovated into the headquarters of Crow Holdings, the Trammell Crow family company. I'm sure they'll find good use for it.
What is, I'm sorry.
Yeah, go ahead.
What is the expected start completion date?
Well, actually, if you drove by there today, you would see that our parking garage is almost finished. So we started construction on November 15th, and how these 4-story wraps, is the lingo that we use for them, are built, is you build the parking structure in the middle first, all concrete parking structure, and then you build the frame apartments around it. So if you went out there today, you wouldn't see a stick of lumber going up as far as framing on the apartments just yet. We're about 3 weeks away from that, but you see the parking structure in place.
Was your project going to be the higher amenity project compared to the other two? Or are you going to be in the middle of that, or just, I'm curious?
We are going to be comparable on certain amenities, such as the fitness area, the conference room, the business center, those kinds of things. There's a well-worn path of what you do in those areas. Our pool's going to be the nicest. Okay, our courtyard's going to be the nicest. Our landscaping will be the best. Our architecture is going to be very, very unique. In Dallas, you see plain old, brick, stucco, shingle roofs, blah, blah, blah. You're going to see something very special about this architecture. So it'll be very compelling. We'll have a 2-story glass storefront that'll be very, very unique to the area. We'll have a porte cochere, which is really, you only see in high-end condominium projects. A water feature inside the leasing office, so when you drive by at night, you'll see a lit water feature. You'll want to come back when we open the next day.
What will the average rent be?
Average rent's a little over $1,000 a month. The average unit sizes are in the 750, 780 range, mostly one bedrooms. Our research over the years and my 35 years of experience has taught us that medical employees are studious people, they're smart people. Typically roommates don't work for that reason, and the reason that they work all crazy hours, it's hard to have a roommate. So 75% ones, 25% twos, no threes.
Is the investment, you know, I don't know what other term to use, but cash out, is it only when you sell it, or what is?
No, there's cash flow opportunities once we get the property built, stabilized. Then there'll be a preferential return of 10% of your investment that starts from the day that you put your money in. So we've had investors that have been in for 3 months that are clocking that 10% preferential return, although right now there's no cash to pay it because we're under construction with no revenues coming out.